Finally, Thor Love and Thunder has come and passed, a movie that for a time had been much anticipated, especially with Thor's resurgence of popularity coming with Thor Ragnarok, which before, although the movie certainly looked aesthetically better, the character of Thor was a bit lackluster, stiff almost. Thor was really no one's favorite at the time, and I see so many people post about how the first Thor movie is the best, but I'd say it certainly looks the best. Very Shakespearean, great tone, but Thor felt a bit shallow as opposed to the more fleshed out, more human Thor we've seen recently. Neither here nor there, but Ragnarok was really refreshing, and Taika Waititi, the director of that movie, saw much praise for it. Although there was plenty of people that didn't agree with his vision for Thor, I was not one of them. I adored Ragnarok and quite enjoyed Waititi's style. I've been a fan ever since I saw What We Do in the Shadows and have followed his work ever since, and was expecting the quirky humor to follow in Ragnarok, so it never caught me off guard in the movie. So when a fourth Thor movie was announced, I was naturally hyped. More awesome Thor moments, crazier cosmic battles, expanding upon Thor's lore, more motherfucking Korg, and most importantly, introducing Gorr, the God Butcher, one of the best, if not the best villains in comics ever. Not only that, but with Christian Bale taking on the role, come on, that's light work for success. That's a recipe for the greatest live action villain ever. Like, why would Christian Bale accept it otherwise? And to my surprise, that was not the case. The movie overall was disappointing, and I'm not saying that to drone up, views. I'm not saying that as some film bro critic that likes to overanalyze shit. You guys know I love the MCU, and I wouldn't say anything unless I really meant it. For many reasons, but one more heinous than all being that they completely wasted all of the talent of Christian Bale and the potential of Gorr, okay? That being said, the movie wasn't all bad. There were things that I did enjoy and changes they made that I thought were great. The beginning, I think, was very powerful with Gorr and his daughter just dehydrated, getting beaten down by the climate of their planet, which, despite the prayers of Gorr, did not stop. And so his daughter dies in his arms. Such a great start, albeit quick. He actually gets to meet his god in the movie, which I really wanted to happen, for Gorr to know for a fact he had a god, and his god was an absolute piece of shit. I thought that was brilliant. After all of Gorr's suffering, he just says he'll find more people to worship him, and to suffer for him is their only purpose. That's a mofo right there. That's a guy that needs to go straight to hell, okay? This leading to the Necro Sword choosing Gorr and giving him the power to kill the god he used to pray to, and making a vow to kill all the gods from that point on. And at this point in the movie, I was like, okay, this could actually turn out pretty well. Then we kind of get a fast forward of the events of Thor's life leading up to now, which I actually liked. I like exploring how long-lived Thor is and how that affects him and how he reacts to things. Even for a god, that must be a lot to endure. Eons of loving and losing people that might be dear to you, and being so hurt that you close your heart off from potential future love. A huge theme of the movie stems from the whole notion or saying it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all, or how my boy Star-Lord puts it, that shitty feeling is better than feeling empty, which I feel like they could have touched on more, especially after Infinity War and Endgame, when Thor talked about how much he's loved and lost. And I think they could have expanded on that with the Avengers and how he lost several of them by different means, of course, or at least if somebody asked him about them and he felt a bit indifferent on the outside, but internally it really hurt that they left. Obviously, we find out a little bit later with those back tattoos. Thor also in the beginning of the movie is dealing with his sense of purpose and wanting it to be more than just fighting battles, and is at odds with where his place in the universe really is, again with that journey of self-discovery that was started in Ragnarok. Him and the Guardians see a slew of godly murders all across the cosmos, and Thor sees Sif in distress. I love seeing Jamie Alexander back in the role, especially with that comic accurate suit, just beautiful. I just really wish we got to see her fight Gorr and maybe try to protect Ballingar. That would have put her to better use in my opinion. I think it also would have been something if Gorr took her into the cave like the one from the comics, and that's where Thor had to go to get her, like that's where he found her, like all beaten and bruised. Maybe Gorr was wanting the Bifrost sword, that's why he went after something like that. But when Thor takes her back to Asgard and Gorr comes in raising hell is when I knew the problems for this movie would begin. Okay, the fight between Gorr and Thor was very nerfed. It wasn't at all epic or shot epically like it should have been. It felt weak, and the tone that we'd expect for the rest of the movie began. Shame on this needless suit transition, okay? This was the most blatant new suit to sell another toy I've ever seen. I'm so glad they took the helmet off because it looked the same kind of ugly as it did in the trailers, and ultimately it comes out of nowhere when if they would have kept that scene with Etri, maybe that could have brought some significance significance to it, but it was very lazy. Along with Thor and Gore's first fight scene in Asgard, there should be a sense of epicness when Thor fights, and this first encounter was just not it, okay? Jane's entrance here was dope, but because of Taika's humor, the sequence is deflated of weight. Like, all the kids get taken, and Thor and Jane don't really seem fazed by it, okay? The parents are worried, which they could have emphasized better, but they didn't, and so you're never really as worried for the kids as you should be. Like, that's the most terrifying thing ever, okay? But it feels like an afterthought in this movie. I do like how Taika gave us backstory of Jane and Thor. I thought it brought Thor down to a more human level, which I really appreciated, especially when we saw that with Ragnarok. Not only was Thor the most powerful we'd ever seen him, but he felt like a person now. I think Taika also handled Jane Foster's cancer arc pretty decently well. They realized that Gore went to the Shadow Realm, and that's where he'd be the most powerful, so they head to Omnipotent City so they can gather a god army. But when they get there, they find out that Zeus, played by the amazing Russell Crowe, is not so benevolent. All these gods seem to be bitch-made and don't care that lower level gods were getting butchered, and that's probably affecting people in a negative way. Like all of these gods were probably doing things that were helping their worlds, but none of the gods cared, and they all basically wanted to stay safe in Omnipotent City, which I like the fight sequence here. I just wish it were longer, and I loved when Korg got hit and Thor in his anger redirects Zeus's lightning bolt. Super badass, and I felt shocked in that moment. Like, is Korg dead now? Like, this came out of nowhere, but of course Korg survived, which kind of took away the weight from that. Like, I love Korg and I would want him to stick around, but he was a bit much in this movie, and I don't know, it was a bad fake out in my opinion. And they end up taking Thunderbolt and dipping out, and when they do, Valkyrie kisses a woman's hand, alluding to Valkyrie being gay. It's revealed that Korg has two dads. Now, personally, that felt like a piss poor attempt at representation. Like, if they're wanting to go for that, why not give Valkyrie a baddie and go all in with it? I know a lot of mofos who would have thoroughly enjoyed that kind of representation, of course. Instead, you waste time on Korg's dads and molten rocks. Like, that shit didn't make sense to me. It felt, again, like a hollow attempt and a waste. Jane tells Thor that she has cancer and she doesn't have much time left, and this was actually a really great moment where Jane is a god, but she's vulnerable, which is one of the best parts of her arc in the comics. And Thor tells her how she made him worthy and taught him the value of helping others, and they decide to spend their remaining time together and vow to get those kids back. That's when we get to the Shadow Realm and the peak of the movie, in my opinion. We finally get some semblance of a back and forth between the characters and Gore, albeit way too short, but awesome while it lasted, as Gore mocked Valkyrie for praying to gods that did nothing for her as her girlfriend died in battle serving them, and how Jane is fighting for gods with their tools, but her fate is still sealed. And Gore forces Thor to call Stormbreaker back, and the fight begins, which is awesome, okay guys? I love the black and white with the splash of real color with the electricity attacks. Love when Jane explodes that monster's head, and the flying was crazy smooth. Such a good dynamic fight sequence, but it should have been like 10 minutes longer, okay? Valkyrie ends up getting stabbed, and they had to dip, which leaves Gore the perfect opportunity, right, to swipe Stormbreaker and get to Eternity to wish all the gods deaths. Very player-hater-ish, which I can respect. I do really like how Jane snaps back to mortal form, and she's in the hospital with chemo, and ultimately, at the end, has to choose between life or helping get those kids back by helping Thor at the center of the universe fight Gore, which I really did not like, okay? This movie basically turns into an Adam Sandler movie where all the cast's kids get to have a special cute little moment as they're given the power of Thor and fight off the Shadow Realm monsters, which seems just so pulled out of Taika Waititi's ass. Like, could Thor have done this the whole time? Like, given everybody the power of Thor, like in Endgame and Infinity War? Like, I know this whole argument dips its toes in the whole, well, why doesn't Tony Stark make everyone an Iron Man suit? But it feels like something that happened just to get the kids involved. Then beat for beat, the whole Thanos versus Thor in Endgame scene happened again, and just as similar, the whole Cap Mjolnir sequence happened, but with much less effect and weight. It just really felt like a cheap copy. The fight between Gore, Thor, and Jane was just a bit lackluster to me, okay? Maybe it was the setting, but I just wish there was more dialogue, more back and forth. Gore has really strong points, and he could have challenged Thor and actually maybe change his worldview and maybe actually get him closer to what his purpose actually is, or his next purpose, but there was none of that. And of the dialogue we got, you know, I just wish it was better, okay? Look, we get it, Taika. Her name is the Mighty Thor. Some people in real life don't like calling her Thor because Thor is, well, Thor's name, and there's other characters that are of the same ilk as Thor that have a different name. And I don't don't know why Jason Aaron didn't give her a unique name, so they call her Lady Thor instead. But somehow that's the meaning, although I'm not sure what exactly is wrong with being a lady or being called Lady Thor. But again, this isn't really that big of a deal for me, but that's an easy thing to say. The dialogue about Thor, say Dr. Jane Foster, followed by Eat My Hammers. Now that, players, was dog shit of the soul. That was Taika being petty as hell to stick it to some mofos on Twitter that didn't want to call her Mighty Thor, which you did not have to do that, okay? Honestly, if you wanted people to call her Mighty Thor, you should have just had Thor call her the Mighty Thor after she actually acted mighty in her battling cancer and her taking on the mantle of Thor to actually save people's lives and that killing her even faster. That is mighty in and of itself, and if you emphasized that and didn't do corny shit, you would have got that point across to absolutely everyone. Now, people that are the people that you're trying to piss off are gonna be even more dejected towards you. You're not gonna win anybody over, and hey, maybe that's your goal, but you end up doing a disservice to that character in the end because you gave her corny and cringe shit to say. Like, Gore is an alien who lost his daughter and is on a warpath to destroy all the gods for it. He doesn't give a fuck about your name. But after that, when Gore does eventually meet Eternity, I actually loved it. I love how Gore chose love and wished for his daughter back, and how Thor actually, in a way, answered his prayer by taking care of his daughter as his own. I also love the direction of Thor becoming a dad. I feel like that's one of the most human things I know. Like, people get so lost in their lives and then they have kids and they somehow find new meaning and purpose in their lives by becoming parents, and I actually really love that for Thor. The thing is, Thor Love and Thunder has so many good things in it, but because of how apparent it is that those things could have been way better, that's what's the most frustrating. The potential was wasted, especially due to the runtime of 1 hour and 59 minutes. I believe there might be an actual mandate out there on upcoming MCU movies to be at or around 2 hours exactly, which I think is complete bullshit, okay? The only reason you'd restrict a movie of that caliber of story would be to play it a bunch of times to make more money. Personally, I believe a movie should be no longer than 3 hours. The Snyder Cut was dope, and certain sequences I'd for sure love to have seen in IMAX, but I don't give a fuck about an intermission. I'm not sitting in a theater for 4 hours. You have Gore and the whole Mighty Thor arc in this movie. You need more time to flesh those stories out and let them breathe. A lot of the movie feels rushed, and we can't sit in these emotional moments long enough to really feel them. I know I'm gonna come off as a James Gunn fanboy shill, that's because I am one, but the reason he's had not all but a lot of the success he's had is because he's excellent at balancing tones. Whether or not you care for Gunn's sense of humor, he always makes sure to balance the humor with deep emotional moments so that one doesn't overtake the other. This movie felt like it had no time to balance all the quirky Waititi humor, and because of that, a lot of the movie you really can't take all too seriously. Lots of the things that should hold weight just don't. It's Thor 4. I don't remember any other character getting a fourth and potentially fifth solo movie of them ever, and you're going to constrain that to just below 2 hours? Not that it isn't possible, but for what they're trying to tell, you need more time. If this movie would have been 30 minutes longer with more gore, more dialogue between him and Thor, and more time to sit in those painful moments, I think this movie would have been exponentially better, but it's not given enough time and it's inefficient with the time it is given. Ragnarok worked because it simultaneously made Thor more relatable and human, but Love and Thunder felt like Waititi constantly taking the same stance of none of this matters, this is all ridiculous, let's not take this seriously, which is really annoying when it's drawn out that long. Like, I fuck with Taika, I still do after this movie even, and hey, maybe because of the restricted runtime he had to cut out a lot of the scenes that would have balanced the humor out, but I've literally read that his whole notion going forward since Ragnarok was to do away with everything that had come before, which is kind of apt for a movie named Ragnarok, but for the rebirth in Love and Thunder, I felt Taika overextended himself, or he was made to because of runtime. Also, the mid-credit scene with Hercules, like, that was barely anything, and I'm not trying to judge the actor before I ever seen his work, but come on, Cavill is literally the blueprint for Hercules. There are very few men in Hollywood that have a physique that can actually rival Hemsworth's, okay? Again, not a big deal for me. Post-credit scene was nice, but ultimately kind of a waste of time in my opinion. At the end of the day, Thor Love and Thunder's biggest flaw isn't that it's bad, it's that it so easily could have been a masterpiece had they been given enough of a runtime to sit in the pain so that we could possibly enjoy the humor when it came. Bars. So that is why I'm going to be giving Thor Love and Thunder a fluctuating 5 to 6 out of 10. A lot of enjoyable stuff, but it's tainted and feels like a diet version of the movie it should have been. Those are my thoughts on it, guys. Let me know your rating of the movie, whether you liked it or not, some of the things you enjoyed, what you wish we would have gotten. Leave your opinions down below. That is it. If you liked the video, leave me a thumbs up, comment down below, and if you want, subscribe. I always appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.